Well, very good day to you all. We right round the world, so it's, I could say, morning, afternoon and evening. I'm Bill Raine, and I'm going to try and tell you a story tonight, which is about how I discovered spirit, or how spirit linked with me. And it's a personal journey. It's unique to me, but there's a lot of things in it which I think will help a lot of people. It's very much a voyage of discovery. There's a lot of tears, a lot of sadness, but there's a lot of joy and laughter as well. And the thing that actually comes through in the book overall is pure love is the foundation key. And spirit help along the way. They guide you, but they don't lead you. They'll help you, but they won't pressurize you until you're writing a book like I did. And believe me, I got pressure to get it finished from the other side. But I'll start at the beginning, where I started, 69 years old, 2018. And the book only covers about 15 months to 254 pages and 14 chapters. It covers a variety of guides that came along and a lot of strange, if you like, foretelling of the future. So I will be referring to passages in the book because it gives the best description rather than me gloss over it. So I start with Catherine, who was my second daughter-in-law to the youngest son, Robert, named after me. She had a diagnosis of cancer, and within 3 months she passed, leaving 2 small boys under 3 years of age. And basically our world fell apart, absolutely fell apart. We didn't know what to do, where to go, and it was just absolute sadness and basically removed from reality. And because the funeral was delayed by a couple of weeks, we had a very difficult time over Christmas because the boys wanted the mummy. And I raged against God. I'm afraid to admit it. Raged against him, I raged against the world. She was only 41 years old. And in the time that we'd known her, 13 years, she'd become basically the mother hen of the family. Now, we were close, a very close family. And family always came first with us. But she had everything organised. She was a born organised. She knew everybody's birthday. We all got reminders about birthdays, about wedding anniversaries and stuff like that. We went on holiday. We had a great time. We used to meet every Saturday at our house, have a meal and a good chin wag. And all of a sudden, everything just stopped. So my wife and I, Maureen, we became the helpers for our Robert so he could go to work. And we went down, collected the kids on a morning, dressed them and everything, looked after them till they started school. And it went on like that. But we didn't get over the sadness, the grief of losing somebody who was so well liked and so well respected. And then one day I opened my phone onto Facebook, and the first thing that came up was an advert for an open circle at the local spiritualist centre. But I didn't recognise the name of the spiritualist centre. And I didn't think much about it. Just went onto Facebook because the kids wanted us on Facebook. We need to keep in touch, Dad, you know, every day and this, that, and the other. So a couple of weeks later, open Facebook again, here's the same advert, pops up straight onto the screen. I'm thinking, oh, what's this all about? Anyway, a couple of weeks later, I saw the advert for a third time, and this was like 5 o'clock at night. Just opened Facebook, very first time, here's this advert, open circle. And I turned around to Murray and I just said, Murray, I'm going down here. There must be a reason why this is coming up. So I went to the Horden Independent Spiritualist Friendship Centre to an open circle meeting. So I sat at the back. You're in a circle really, but I sat as far away as possible, just in a corner, and listened to what was said, and people giving messages out, trainee mediums and those that were wanting to give messages out. Heard nothing. Nobody sort of said anything message-wise to us, but I was greeted and asked why I'd come, and I couldn't answer. I just couldn't answer. I couldn't get any words out to say it. Well, it was just on the spur of the moment because I saw the advert. I couldn't even say that. So anyway, I started going in on a Wednesday night, quite regular. There was a cup of tea and cake and that, and we had a big chat after the service. And there was a few tears, and I just said that I'd lost my daughter-in-law, and that's all I said. I didn't want to give anything away because I wasn't sure whether spiritualism was fake or whether people were reading your mind or things like that. So I'd give them as little information as possible. And they said, well, we have a divine service on a Sunday evening if you'd like to come to the divine service. And there's a medium on that gives messages out. So I started going on the Sunday evening and a Wednesday to the open circle. And then a couple of weeks later, the medium who runs the centre, called Raine Wilson, she said, she gave me a message on a Sunday service. The medium that was booked hadn't turned up and she took over. And it didn't give us anything about anybody apart from myself. And what she said was that I'm being told that you need to pack up all your troubles, all your worries, and put them in a locker and lock the door. And when you lock the door, you'll get a bunch of keys that will open many doors for you. And I thought, well, that was a bit cryptic. But I thought about it, and then the following week she said, would you like to join the development circle on a Saturday afternoon? And I said, well, what is it? And she says, well, it's learn to be a medium. And I thought, well, I'll come as an observer. So she says, well, just come as an observer, it's fine, and just see what happens. So anyway, I went on the Saturday, and there was about 8 or 9 people sitting in a circle, and I was one of them. They were all women, apart from me. I was the only guy there. And we sat in the circle, and they said the Lord's Prayer, and she said, right, we're going into meditation. So she put this weird music on, and it's called Merlin's Magic, actually. And it's a Reiki music. It was on for 15 minutes. So she said, just sit in the chair, and we're sitting in a circle. She said, just sit quietly in your chair, put your feet on the floor, close your eyes, and just see what happens. So, of course, 15 minutes later, you're listening to this weird music, you're sitting in a room with a bunch of people you don't know. And I get quite nervous. And I always used to get wrong at school for giggling when you're nervous, which I am now, believe it or not. And I suppressed it to sort of a coffee sort of sneeze. And anyway, she called us all back. The meditation finished. And she says, "By you're a queering." And I says, "How's that?" She says, "You know." And I thought, well, that's it. I've blown my bridges. I've heard nothing, done nothing. So anyway, she went round the circle to the people that were there, and some had messages for the group, and others could give a message to one of the others in the circle. And I thought, well, this is great, this. And she came to me and she says, well, what did you say? I said, nothing. It was just black. Everything was black. And this funny music. And she says, well, that's okay. She says, it'll take a few weeks to develop. And I thought, well, what are we developing here? So anyway, a few weeks went by sitting in this circle, hearing nothing, seeing nothing. And then I started to see eyes. I would just see an eye, but it was in black and white. And that's all I was getting, was this eye. And it never got any messages on the divine night, on the Sunday. And then this one particular day, Saturday again, I was sitting and in meditation, and I saw this red Indian, and he was in full colour, and he was like that in my face. And it just popped up, and I thought, oh, what's that? Jumped back. And he had these bands on his arms, and he was muscular, and he was just looking at me, just staring at me like this. And I thought, don't like the look of him. And I don't think he liked the look of me, to be honest. So anyway, I told Irene when she sort of come round and said, "What, have you seen anything?" And I said, "Oh, I've seen this guy," and I described him. And one of the ladies, actually the lady sitting next to me, she says, "Bill, that's my guy. They call him Dee, and he's a red Indian." I says, "Oh, I know he's a red Indian with braids on and a couple of feathers in the braids and that." Anyway, a couple of weeks after that, on the Wednesday, I was sitting at the back of in my usual position, right in the corner, and the message was going. And then I got this vision of two old ladies sitting in chairs, and they were looking at me, and I'm thinking, where did that come from? And she said, this lady spoke to me. She says, "Are you going to get up and speak?" And I'm sort of saying in my mind, "I've got nothing to say." She says, "You stand up, I'll give you something." So it came, the girl who had been giving the messages up, she stood up. She sat down rather, and I stood up. Felt like an idiot, right lump. Because everybody looks at you when you stand up. And I said, "I've got two ladies sitting." And then I heard the word Edith, and I says, "Oh, one of them's called Edith." And then she says, "Well, describe us." So I described these two ladies. And the one that was doing the most talking, she says, "3 sisters." And I says, "Oh," she says, "3 sisters." I says, "I'm not sure whether she had 3 sisters or who she wants to speak to is one of 3 sisters." And she sort of gave a little smile, this lady. And she says, "Right, tell them what you see now." And she stood up. This old lady got up off the chair, and she morphed into this younger woman. And she started, it like opened up onto like a dance floor. And she was sort of twirling slowly around this dance floor. And I described this blue dress that she had on with a very thin belt in the center, the tight little plaits down the side. And she was dancing. And she just says, "Tell her we can go dancing every night over here. It's great." So I said, "Oh, she goes dancing regular." She says, "I always used to do, even when I was on your side. We used to go dancing nearly every night." And I says, "Oh, yeah." And anyway, this girl put her hand up. She says, "I think that might be me mum, but they didn't call her Edith." And the lady said, "Look," she says, "look at me face and tell her what you see." And her face come right close to us, and all I could see was bright red lipstick. And I say, "She's wearing bright red lipstick." And the girl says, "Well, yes, me mum used to. But they didn't call her Edith." So I said in my mind, "Look, you can hear what she's saying, I'm sure." She says, "Look," she says, "she used to watch me putting this lipstick on when I used to go to the dance twice a week, Monday to Friday, two days in the week. We used to go dance, and she used to watch me put this makeup on. And she says, I never wore it any other time but to this particular 2 nights we went dancing." So that's what I said to the lady. So at that, the lady, you could hear her sob a little bit. And through the sob, she says, "I can remember that, but I don't know who Edith is." And the lady said, tell her Edith was my next door neighbour who I used to go dancing with every night, and that's who's sitting in the chair. And that was it. And I sat down and everybody was just looking. I was thinking, how did I do that? So anyway, going back to the Saturday morning, another session, and Irene was going round, and I hadn't had anything in particular. And she says, well, I can tell you something now, Bill. She says, my guide said to me that you were asking time and time again for your guide to give you something for the circle and to give you something for one of them in the circle. And he started to laugh. And he says, you don't even know what they call him. Which I didn't know I had a guide, like a doorkeeper. So she says, do you want to meet him? Do you want to meet your guide? So I said, yeah, I will. And this was the beginning of strange, really strange things happening. So she said, right, stand up. So she was opposite me, Irene, in the opposite side of the circle. So I stood up. She says, close your eyes. I'm going to send you some energy. So I'm standing, eyes closed, feet slightly apart, hands down by my sides. And then all of a sudden there's this ragged orb of, you could say it was like ball lightning, but it was ragged, but it was like a ball inside a ball, and it was rotating, and it was like right in front of us. But I had my eyes closed and I had this vision in, as if I had my eyes open, this ball, and I didn't know where it was going to go. But it was up my nose, in my mouth, as it was going inside as what would happen. But it was mesmerizing, but at the same time, it was quite, you didn't feel frightened about it. It seemed to have this energy about it. And then all of a sudden it disappeared, and it was just like a pair of curtains opening. And I was on the back of this ship, this wooden sort of vessel, quite a small one really, single mast, and it was in mountainous seas. And you could see the waves coming towards it. The sail was down. There was a pennant straight out from the top of the mast. And Irene said, can you see anyone? And this is where I'm going to take a bit out of the book, because I think you need to understand this a little bit. I saw a man standing in front of me, but he seemed to be just below me. And I described him. He was dressed in leather just below the knee breeches that had cross-patterned laced sides. He had a woolen shirt on and a leather jacket. And he had a blue and white spotted scarf covering his head, but his hair came out of the back and down like a ponytail. And he had woolen socks on and leather-thonged sandals. In his right hand, he had a leather-woven stock with a loop that was around his wrist. And there was leather strands coming off this stock with like knots on them. And that was in his right hand. It seemed to be a badge of authority and discipline, although I got the impression that he was a kindly man, about 54 years old. He was quite stockily built, around 5'8" in height, but he had a pain in his left leg. And as I sort of sensed this pain in his left leg, it came that it had been broken some years before. So then Irene asked us about the ship. So it was a small wooden, single-masted coastal type vessel with a single cargo hold behind the mast. And a vision of the bow came up with a large almond-shaped eye and a dark eyebrow painted on it. And I saw a name, and it was a bit blurred, and it looked like Heraclean. And I asked in my mind, I didn't get that. And then it came up as Hermes in big letters, like a street sign, Hermes. And Irene said, "Are you the captain?" And I said, "No, I'm the steersman." She says, "What's your name?" And I said, "Albert." And I didn't know where this was coming from. It's just like coming out. And she asked how many were on the ship. And I said, "There's 4 on the left side of the bow. There's 3 on the right, plus me, and 1 other behind me. 9 souls in total." And as I said that, there was a particular large wave came towards me from the front left, or the port bow, if you like. And it was breaking on the top, and it come right over the ship, curling down onto the bow. At that point, Irene brought us back. And I sensed I was travelling backwards and upwards from the ship as the ship buried itself in the wave, and it didn't come up. And I opened my eyes to find Irene standing in front of us. And there was a member of the class on either side of me, ready to catch me. And then there was a tremendous sense of loss, and causing the death of my crew came to me, and the tears were just running down my face. And Irene asked us if I had a pain in my chest, and I said, "No." She says, "Well, he'd had a heart attack at the wheel, and the ship had foundered in 1758 with the loss of all hands." And I asked, "Well, why?" Is it class members around me? And she says, "I've never seen anyone leaning so far over without falling down." And that's why the members were there, to catch me in case I did fall, but I didn't. But they all knew I'd been on that ship in that storm. And I'd relived the death of all those souls on that ship. And it really shook me. And it made me think that there definitely is something in spirit. There's something that I knew absolutely nothing about. But I was curious. And as a few more weeks went on, I started to get the ability to give a few more messages up. Just short ones, nothing spectacular, but they were to the point and they were truth that people could recognize who the message went to. And then Saturday, the 22nd of June, 2019, we were sitting in the circle, and I felt some presence behind us. And it was icy, icy cold. And you just had the feeling if you turned around, you'd see something. It was so close to us, icy, icy cold. And I said to Irene, "Irene, I think there's somebody standing behind us, or something standing behind us." And she just looked up and she says, "Oh yeah, there is, Bill." She says, "Look, just go as if you're going into meditation and just ask them to step back." So green as grass, little old me, I sort of closed my eyes and I said, "Can you step back, please?" And there was just this really nasty voice in my ear. You said, "You're not powerful enough." And that's the last thing I knew. And I heard Irene's voice saying, "Bill, come back. Please come back. Bill, come back, please." And I could hear this voice in the distance, and gradually I came back. And it took quite a while. And everybody in the circle, apart from one girl, looked absolutely terrified. And she was just sitting on the chair, and she was actually Norwegian, this girl. And she says, "Why didn't you let the spirit speak?" And Irene looked at her and she says, "What do you mean? It was a bad spirit." She says, "No, he was shouting in Norwegian." And this girl was the only one in the group that spoke Norwegian, and I was shouting in Norwegian. "Okay, I'm going." So I didn't get an explanation as to why. Irene sort of said, "Right, I'll take it out the room." And she went out the room and into the back room and then came back. But he was still there. But he had stepped back, and I was shaking most of that time. And then Irene said, right, no more meditation at home, because I used to do a couple of nights meditation at home. She says, no more meditation at home, and you're going to sit next to me every time we have this circle. So that really put a damper on things for me. But as, you know, time went on, each week went on, it seemed to die a death a little bit, and I felt a little bit more comfortable. But I wasn't given an explanation, and that was the problem. So anyway, the 10th of July, there was a woman called Freda Robson, had a trance night, and she came to the church, and she was sitting under a red light, and her face changed, her fingers grew, and she gave absolutely spot-on messages to about 8 different people in the room during the course of this trance night. And I was just thinking to myself, that's what I want to do. Now, at the time, she'd said they could take photographs, and I took a camera, but I'd also took a video camera, and I took a video. But I didn't know who she was. And I went back home, and she'd said photographs and stuff like that, just leave them to cook for 24 hours, and then you can have a look at them. And that's what I did with the video. And what I saw on the video was fantastic. But I didn't know who to give it to or anything. And I was talking to me cousin, my niece, and I says, do you know Freda Robson from Amazing? And she says, yes, I do. She's in my slimming class. And I says, oh, I've got a video for her. Can you give her it? So she got the video. Anyway, 3 weeks later, Freda did the divine service on the Sunday night. So in this service, she talked to a guy called Mr. Robinson, an oldish guy in his 80s. All his family's passed, as is his wife. And Freda gave him a message. And Freda told him the exact words he said to his wife as she passed. And he had tears in his eyes, and he says, Freda, he says, I've waited 35 years for a medium to tell me that. And that was me hooked. So I stayed behind for the tea and stuff like that, and that's how I met Freda Robson. 8 weeks later, I sat for the first time in a trance circle with Freda. And there was 3 of us there. There was Freda and myself, and a woman called Irene Hartail, who used to spend 6 months in India for about 15 years with the gurus and stuff like that. And she took Freda across there a couple of times. She'd asked me to take a tape recorder. So we switched the tape recorder on, and I was sitting, 2 of us, and Irene was the observer at the other end of the table, sitting in the chair. Freda says, right, just as if you're going into meditation, close your eyes, breathe, as if you're going to sleep. We'll see what happens. And within a couple of minutes, there's a voice coming out of Freda that I didn't recognise. And it's a man. And he's talking about what we're going to do today. And he says, well, we're going to talk to you. Like me. We're going to talk to you and see what's going on. So he asked my guide to step forward. And then this man's voice come out of me, and I had no control over it. It was just coming out of my mind. And Freda's guide and my guide were talking about me. And they're saying he doesn't know which path to take. We cannot tell him. He's got to make his own mind up. And I thought, this is amazing, this. And I couldn't stop it. And when I played it back, there was all sorts of information, because not only was this guide here, Freda had only allowed us 15 minutes. And this guy had said his little bit, and he said, oh, we need to talk again because it's his first time. We don't want to stress him. So Freda brought us like back to rest. And it's all down on this record. And then there was a woman come through. And it turns out that this woman, she came through me, and it was quite a softer voice, more like a woman's voice, but it was my voice box she was using. And she said, 423 years ago, I was burnt as a witch. And Freda asked her if she'd come to help me, and she says, I haven't made my mind up yet. But she used some slightly different words, but that's what she did. Anyway, she said there's terrible times to come, man-made. And she said that there was thousands of them burnt at the stake, and it was man's superstition that got them burnt at the stake. And the strange thing was that Freda had a past life where she was burnt, but she smelled her hair burning. So she was laughing with this witch because the witch said, oh, I was taken away before the pain started. So what happened is that she was going to help me. That's what we found out. And she asked Freda to hold her hand. And she said to Freda, she says, you're going to do wondrous things, both here and when she transitions. And she would be given time to complete her work on the earth plane, more time. But she has to believe in spirit. And spirit would tell her when and how. And Freda said, right. And then she said, you must, nay, not must. You will be told, child. You will be told, believe. Believe, you will be told, and it will be so. And then she said, right, child, and released Freda's hand. Now, this first experience was weird, not being fully in control. And the strange thing was, my legs felt like they were getting lowered into a bath of iced water, and you couldn't stop it. And it was creeping up from my feet, yet I was allowing it to happen. And the words were filling my mind, a bit like a car engine spluttering. And it wasn't hesitation and bits and pieces, and then it sort of went into full flow after this lady come through. But what she left us with was absolute, pure love. You just had that intense, warm feeling that you were just wrapped up in a nice, warm blanket and nothing mattered anymore. Absolutely not. And the strange thing is, you cried tears of joy, but you also cried tears of sadness. And I had both. It was so absolutely moving, and I knew then that there was definitely life after death. And that was my first spiritual communication. And then it went on from there. So week 2, the second week with Freda, although it ended up, we actually discussed tortured souls and timelines. And then the guy had asked Freda to speak, and Freda was actually paralyzed. She couldn't speak, her jaw was clamped, she couldn't move her feet, her arms or anything. So Raine had to help her to get out of this. So, and that's when that one finished. But there was a lot of information passed. And then this brought us to the 28th of September. And I was still going to the open circle at this time. And I went to the open circle this Saturday morning, and there was another guy in the group, and they called him Paul, and he was a nurse. But he was a nurse in a hospice, which tended to have a lot of children in the later stages. And he came and he said that he'd been working in this place for a number of years, and he was burnt out. And he'd been asking Spirit all week that he needed some help, some guidance. Otherwise, he was just going to pack it all in. And the people in the circle were sort of, well, you've got a dog, take it for a walk down the woods and stuff like that. And he was actually on the rostrum with another lady called Margaret. And I was sitting off to one side a little bit because I still didn't really like sitting with all these ladies I didn't really know. And I saw a set of prison bars above Margaret's head. And Margaret must have seen something in my face, in what was happening, and she was trying to sort of see what's happening. And I was like, I don't know. But I knew there was somebody with us. There was somebody desperately trying for me to get up and say something. And I was saying, well, no, you'll have to wait, you'll have to wait. And I was trying to keep this energy back. And I looked up again, and there was a rabbit above Margaret's head. And the thought came straight in my mind, fire off light. And I said, well, I'm frightened, so I'm going. And I just got up and I got the books and I went to the door. And Irene says, where are you going? I says, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore, Irene. I'm finished with it. And she says, sit down and talk about it. And I put my books down and I turned around, and that's the last thing I can remember. The next thing I remember, I was standing in my kitchen, and I've got a 1-cup kettle. There was a cup underneath with a tea bag in, and it went off again, and it makes a noise when it goes off, of course, dumps the water. And that's when I come round, and there was tears streaming down my face. And Maureen says, you came in, you just totally ignored me and went straight into the kitchen. And she only told me that a fortnight ago. And I didn't know how I got from the church to the kitchen, because somebody drove the car, and I went outside, I looked at the car, and it was absolutely parked perfectly. It was 2 inches off the wall. There's a wall on one side where I parked, and it was 2 inches off the wall, all the way down, handbrake on and everything. And how I did that, I don't know to this day. So that was takeover number 2. So I went to Irene on the Sunday and I said, I need a word. She says, oh, come down Monday. Monday's the healing day. I went down Monday. She wouldn't really talk to us. She says, oh, you'll have to come back Wednesday before the open circle. I went back and I took the recording, the first recording, and I played it. And I said, you need to listen to this. And she listened to it and she says, that's the work of the devil. She says, you'll have to make a choice. It's either the circle or Freda. You can't do both. And I says, well, I'm going with Freda. I says, I'll support your church. I'll come on a Sunday. But I ain't coming back to the circle. So I didn't. And that's when I continued with Freda. And we did 11 sessions up till January 2020 was session 11. In session 11, we all thought it was the worst one. And yet, strangely enough, we all had the same vision, which was a construct by Freda's guide, Guy. And it was a lake in the moonlight and fires burning. And it was the gathering, what they call the gathering. But in between time up to that, they took us to a plane of understanding. Guy took us to a plane of understanding. And I met my mum. And this figure came towards us. And I didn't realise it was me mum. And Guy said, is your mum in spirit? And I said, yes. And he says, this is your mother. They give you a big motherly hug. And it came towards us in my vision. And then it just seemed to pass through me. But as it passed through me, I had a vision in my head of me as a tiny child in my mother's arms, cuddled in. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. But then after that, we went in through this tunnel. We went to the beginning of time. And everything was black and stars and that, and I ended up floating. And at the beginning, Guy had said there was about 10 or 15 people with him watching. Or he said, there's almost 10,000 people watching you, like on big screens. And we just want you to tell us what you see. And he said, you'll see colours, different colours. And the strange thing was, the sky wasn't blue, it was green. And the grass was blue. And I came out. When I came back, I didn't really want to come back because I was floating and I was so peaceful and I just felt so loved. I just didn't want to leave that place. But anyway, I came back and Freda brought me back. And as I came back, I had a vision of a cabin, a little wooden shack with a little veranda on, and there was a purple light coming out of it. And they were making the tea and stuff like that, and they were talking, and I knew I wasn't back. I didn't feel fully aware. And Freda said something, I turned to look at it, and it wasn't Freda's face. And I said, Freda, I don't recognise that face. And I was looking at it, and there was just like black holes where her eyes were, and her face was slightly different, but it looked a bit like Freda. But I knew it wasn't her. And then all of a sudden, it was just like getting a brick in the face, and I just went, it's your mother. And then our mother just came into me, and this was my daughter, and I hadn't held my daughter or talked to my daughter for 40 years. And I just put my arms around her, absolutely sobbed. And there was all these words of encouragement came out and apologies, and it was just, it was absolutely amazing. And then it sort of went off, we broke up, and the tears just stopped, and I didn't feel sad. I just felt I'd done a job. I'd done something that this spirit, our mum, had waited 40 years, and she'd waited for me to do this for Freda. And I just felt I've paid a debt. And there's so much information in the book, and they told us to write it. There was something which I had. The last little bit, I just want to give you this. I know it's on page 111. I've got it sort of stuck down. I'm sure it's 111. When I was writing the book, but it just goes on. It's now the 31st of January 2020, and I thought I'd finished writing this chapter. But I just felt as if spirit was with us all day. I just couldn't seem to get rid of it. Not that I wanted to. I wanted them to either say something or just sort of tone it down a bit. Anyway, I went to bed, and I woke up at exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, wide awake. And I lay for about an hour. I couldn't get back to sleep. I thought, right, I'll go downstairs. So I went downstairs and made a cup of tea, sat on the settee, just thinking. And then my mind started to whirl. Pieces of the jigsaw were just like coming together. And I felt the power and serenity of a spirit, and knew exactly who it was. And the spirit took us back to my first trance session with Freda. And she said, yes, this was me. It was also me whom you call the witch. I am the one who came to you in this session also. And yes, I am Bella, and I am Catherine. We showed you the plane of understanding, and understanding is awareness. It is time for you to use the energy we've given you. The fine-tuning is complete. Your awareness will grow, as will your understanding. The circle is completed. This is the point I have chosen for you to mention me in your book. I have now made you aware of the true privilege you have been given from spirit. And a thought came to my head, that's magic, that. Very magical. And then I'm thinking, did the word magic not come from the word magi or magi from the Bible? This must be one of the truths of the Bible, one that remains from the original text and not tainted by man's hand, as they had told us in the very beginning. She came back with a little musical laugh, and she said, yes, I am a magi. Now you understand exactly who I am. You are blessed, child. Goodbye until we meet again. I will be with you always. And I'm not ashamed to admit it, but while writing that, I had tears coursing down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of joy. And for a couple of minutes, they didn't stop. Then suddenly the daylight turned off a tap. I felt the love and the peace that she was giving to us. So I know I'm blessed. I know she is there, watching, always. And I'll end it there. Thank you for listening.